Really happy, again, honored to be here. Going to introduce our next panel, our next moderator here. It's the Odd Couple, iGaming and Tribes. And the moderator is going to be Saam Hafezi. Hafezi.
Saam, and you appreciate it, though. Thank you.
Sorry, I just...
No, you're good. No worries. Right. Listen, before we start, I want everybody to stand up real quick. Everybody just got back from lunch. Let's get a little bit of energy flowing. Little shaking. Yeah, all right. We're good. Now let's sit down and enjoy this panel. So thank you all for coming, and I want to thank these three gentlemen to my left, and I'm going to start by introductions. This is Gabriel Benedik, Senior Executive of Government Affairs for GLI. Robert Christensen, the Director of Interactive for Choctaw Casino. And Chris Garrow, the Director of Gaming Operations for Prairie Band of Kansas. So, gentlemen, thank you all for joining me. So, everybody in this conference is talking about iGaming in Maryland and New York, maybe in the next 2 years. But these two gentlemen, and Gabe, and even myself, we've been involved in tribal gaming for decade, 2 decades. This is the experience right here. These are the people that we need to talk to about iGaming and gaming in general as we are looking to expand the industry as a whole. So I want to jump right into it. Robert, I know you guys are doing a lot of things, and I'm glad you're at the right panel now. For those who don't know, Robert has been crashing panels all day today.
Nonstop. Yeah.
But I'm glad you made it on this one as scheduled. Yeah. So, Robert, why don't you tell me a little bit what you guys are doing right now at Choctaw and why it's so important?
Sure. Yeah. So we, like Chickasaw running WinStar in Oklahoma as well, we've received alternate technical standards from the NIGC to allow for mobile on-premise Class 2 gaming. It essentially considers a customer-owned mobile device, a gaming device, and anywhere on gaming territory we can offer Class 2 games in a mobile format. So we've partnered with a platform of our choice to build out not only Class 2, but use that same platform going forward for other strategic initiatives in the future, which would include Sportsbook when that's available and other real money gaming opportunities as they present themselves. Just to speak to Class 2 briefly, tribes have the sovereign right to offer Class 2 games, and it's one of the most important protections that tribes have in protecting sovereignty. So for us at Choctaw, one of our mandates we've been given is to expand Class 2 when and where that becomes available to us. So for us, Class 2 gaming on mobile devices is that next step. And so I think the opportunity not only generates revenue for tribes and tribal operators, but it presents, content providers from all over the world the opportunity to bring games to jurisdictions where that was not available before.
And Robert, I'm going to keep it high. I'm going to ask you a high-level question. What's the difference between Class 2 and Class 3? And
sure.
Just high-level, what does that mean?
Yes. So Class 2 games would be bingo-based games. So bingo inherently is Class 2. And so for slot machines on the floor to be a Class 2 slot machine, you would have bingo math in the background that's taking place at each spin, as opposed to a random number generator.
So, but it's basically indistinguishable between a normal slot game that you would see ordinarily.
Yeah, at this point, at a glance, you would not be able to tell a difference.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, Gabe, let me ask you, from GLI's perspective, Robert, they're doing a lot of initiatives at Choctaw, and Chris, they're doing some things, and we're going to get into what Chris is doing in a bit. But how is all this possible? How is the entering into a digital format possible without sort of the regulation there from the states?
Sure. Some of the things that we've been seeing in the tribal gaming community is the exploration, which my colleague here just mentioned, that is Class 2 mobile. It's become very interesting right now because, quite frankly, a lot of tribes that aren't compacted are looking for unique ways of entering a different space. Getting away from traditional gaming. And traditional gaming would be in brick and mortars, which, you see slot machines, these bingo-style Class 2 machines, but in the mobile version. And that's something that they're looking at exploring because, obviously, technology is a big component and piece to what we're doing here. In a Class 3 environment, tribes need to be compacted with the state. in that situation, we've heard discussions ad nauseum at this conference about when's it going to happen? When are we going to get it? Who's going to be next, right? There's so much excitement about the next. And look at the solutions that we can work on now. So having said that, people in tribal gaming are looking at exploring this class 2. And what they're doing is you could take the NIGC, they have regs out right now, mirror it with GLI 19, which discusses iGaming, and marry the two. You marry the two, you can come up with kind of, we're looking at creating like alternate standards, right? And this way, when they test for it, they can actually, when they go live, they can actually go into different markets, as you will, and meet those standards. So it makes it much easier to get into the market if you know what you can create for your operating system.
So that's a really good point, that it makes it easier to enter in the market.
Sure.
And, Chris, I want to ask you, because I know sports wagering is now legal in Kansas, one of the states that it's legal. Do you think that that's going to be a segue into hopefully iGaming coming into your state?
Yeah, and I think you look at other states like Oklahoma and Texas, and I think the population thinks, it's just sports betting, it's not really gambling. And then it definitely is paving the way for iGaming for sure. It's just getting people used to betting on their mobile devices. For us right now, we're only retail sports book, so we don't have the iGaming piece yet. We're working on that. But that absolutely is paving the way for iGaming.
That's great. But how do you see the blockers potentially coming? What are the blockers? Where's what's preventing this from actually happening and making this much bigger and getting it going much quicker?
Lawmakers.
It was funny. My colleague Sean Fluharty was on a panel the other day, and he said it was the good, the bad, and the ugly. And his response to what's the ugly was politics. And he's the head of government affairs, and he's a politician himself. But it's very interesting that you say that we're getting in our own way of growing the industry. And Gabe mentioned making it easier to enter in the space. Well, we're Playingo. We're one of the top performers in Europe. We have amazing content, but we're not in this yet. What can you do to help us to get into this, Gabe?
Yeah, obviously, we need help from our government affairs people that work for the operators who have conversations with, the legislators. I think education is extremely important. Without educating the people that can make changes, we know what the industry is, right? We sit here and we can all agree on things, disagree, learn. But it's not us that are making the decisions. We would love to have iGaming tomorrow if we could. Obviously, the people who are making decisions are the ones that we need to get a hold of and educate. That's the only way this industry is going to grow, whether it's in tribal, commercial, whatever, is education. The sooner, and this theme has been repeated over and over, and I've had conversations the last 2 days with the same people saying the same things and hearing these kind of things. But it is, we have to continue to spread the message, eliminate any of the confusion. And I think there's a lot of confusion for reasons, and reasons that I won't get into because we quite frankly, don't have enough time. But, to keep it simple, what Fluharty said, and he mentioned, right, there's a good and there's a bad and there's an ugly, but, getting to the finish line is going to be a lot harder. However, you mentioned in your opening about, hearing Maryland, New York, all these kind of discussions and everyone bringing up the point. There's a lot of tribes right now in our space that have opportunities to get a head start of the Marylands and the New Yorks, right? That have opportunities, whether they're compacted with the state or they're looking into Class 2 and looking at a Class 2 mobile version, which would open up the catalog for those casinos to incorporate these kind of games.
That's the thing. Like, Robert, we've been talking for about a year now that you've been saying you want more content, the availability of content for your growing in Class 2 mobile on-prem opportunity, and we want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. So this is all conversations that experienced individuals are having that, again, I say this and I repeat this, you guys are the ones that have been in the business for a decade, 2 decades that are going to lead the way into the future for iGaming growth and opportunities once it comes into your states. Chris, can you talk a little bit more? Because I know that You mentioned the blocker being politics, and unfortunately that's always going to be a blocker on anything in society. What can we do about that? But I know you're hosting the upcoming Class 2 gathering, for instance, at your property. Why is that important for you that you're hosting that?
We saw a need within, there's a ton of conferences, to be honest, there's a lot. There's a need to have more education on Class 2 specific. We have OIGA, obviously, it's mostly a Class 2 market there. We launched an offsite facility with Class 2 slot machines a few years ago. We didn't do that before. And so one of my notes I wrote down is using regulations to our advantage. So the state-run casinos in Kansas have a different set of regulations. So wide area progressives, for example, they couldn't do that, and we could do that. Or a math model. So using all those regulations to our advantage, but also I want to touch on how the comment you made about getting into the U.S. You have to partner with somebody, and the European math model on slots doesn't translate over to the U.S. It's not volatile. We like volatile games in the U.S. and there also has to be a unique spread with the volatility. So, if you can ride that volatility journey or not, depending on your wallet size, it's all those things need to be considered when trying to break into the U.S. market and Class 2.
You brought up a really good point about the volatility. I mean, you're right. There's huge differences in the math models between Class 3 games and European games, and what works in Europe, what works over here. And I think we as an industry, we as a supplier, I think we're doing a good job of acknowledging that, and we want to be able to bring our product to the tribal space as quickly as possible. So, Gabe, we were talking actually before we came in here about Florida,
Sure.
and what Seminole just did. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, kudos to the Seminole tribe. I mean, obviously they didn't create their decision what happened there. We'll just call it we can actually probably start referring to it as a Florida Seminole model, but it's not a original model. They looked at different states when they studied this to come up with this decision. They looked at how New Jersey operated and that sort of thing in order to get that decision where those wagers that are placed ultimately go through the tribal land and they settle through that. But they can make wagers all throughout the state, be in Jacksonville, and that's not on tribal land, so to speak, but the wager gets settled. I think that's an interesting model as different tribes look at, different ways or different approaches to expand gaming and grow their gaming. So, for now, we'll say the Florida Seminole model could be something that tribes start looking into and seeing how they can incorporate that in their either current compacts or as they go to renegotiate compacts. Again, because there's a big decision process. It's not very easy. It's very rigorous and challenging. But again, as tribes either enter into compact or renegotiate, I think those are two things to factor in. And now they have a case study to kind of reference, and that would be the Florida Seminole. There's also a bunch of interesting things going on in the industry right now as it pertains to Indian gaming. Just yesterday in the news in California, the Attorney General ruled in favor for the tribes. It's something that's been in the work for 10 years, something to this effect. And I won't get into it. You guys can Google it and do the search. We're on a time constraint, but we could talk about it in further detail, but we'd be out of time. But check that out. That just broke yesterday. That's a very important decision for Indian country, and I think that will be beneficial maybe for the California tribes. So that's something just to kind of keep an eye on. Again, there's some interesting stuff. I know the Department of Interior has a decision to make by the end of the month that would actually bypass tribes negotiating with states. This is going to be a change to the game. If this goes through, tribes will be able to negotiate with the Department of Interior and just bypass the state altogether and get the federal government involved. So we haven't really seen what that's going to do, that kind of effect, that ripple effect that's going to bring. But there's some optimism behind that, and that's good. When there's optimism, that's good. Positive stuff, again, these kind of new things that are developing in Indian gaming is going to be very impactful for tribes, and that's a good thing for tribal gaming and operators and things like that. So again, check out this stuff, do the research, get the education and really grow and learn and have some good opportunities in a way.
No, thanks for that insight. It seems like there are some battles about to happen, but these are important battles to have. And this is actually a question for both Robert and you, Chris. But I'm going to start with Robert. Why are these battles so important? I mean, we're like, we're talking about tribal sovereignty and the importance of economic self-determination. Like, and why is this important for the tribe?
It's the most important thing when it comes to tribes. I mean, why is it so important? It's everything, right? Tribes' ability to provide for themselves, to offer services for their citizens, is the most critical thing that we work on in tribal gaming. We support the nations, we support the people, and so Class 2, like I said, for us is the main way we're focusing on in protecting and expanding that sovereignty. And so, when you ask why it's important, it's everything.
Chris?
So compacts are, agreement between the tribe and the state. And for Kansas, when we renegotiate our compact, sports betting was prohibited. And not to get into the Seminole case, but when we wrote our compact, we wrote that that's the model that we're going to do. But we're only retail because the tribe is not going to do a revenue share with the state. They were giving up sovereignty. We're giving money to the state. We shouldn't be giving the state no tribe should be giving the state any revenue share. So those compacts are so important. And in Kansas, we have a good compact where we don't have a revenue share. And when we have states that have to give up their revenue, that takes money away from the tribal government and the programs that the tribes need to operate. Tribal gaming, for the most part, started with Class 2 and bingo specifically, and built these beautiful bingo halls, and now these beautiful resorts, that outshine some of the ones on Las Vegas. People don't think that look at Foxwoods, Mohegan Sun, Yamava, like these are destination resorts, and they're beautiful resorts. So it's important that when people look at tribal gaming, they have to see the whole picture and what that fund, like we're funding a government. And we're funding services and social services and all these important programs for tribal members.
Now, here's a question for you both again. When, hopefully, iGaming eventually will come to both of your states at some point in the future, because it'll allow both of your tribal governments to take advantage of that opportunity and benefit the people, the tribes, even further. But there have been studies that have been done that constantly say, and I think rightfully so, that there is no evidence to cannibalization of brick and mortar properties when iGaming gets introduced. Just want your thoughts on that, Chris.
For me, I needed to answer that question, I need to do a little bit more research. I've heard, spoken with some people in Michigan that yes, it has. I think it depends on your location and where is it? Is it statewide? Is it on the reservation only? Those things need to be considered too. I think if you market it properly, it will not have an effect on it.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, there was a study that was done recently by Eilers that I think on a quarterly basis it was 2.4% increase in revenue. So again, you made a great point if it's done right. So all the people that are worried about any cannibalization effects, they probably don't have the foresight and the vision to do it right. So really good point that you brought up.
I can actually just jump in, and a great example would be, and if no one's familiar with, is Connecticut. Look at the Connecticut tribes, right? They operate iGaming and they have brick and mortar casinos, and they do it well.
Yeah, the prevailing understanding, the study you mentioned, the example you just gave, it shows that cannibalization is limited, right? And I think the right way to present new verticals to our players is it's a different opportunity to participate in gaming, right? It doesn't replace anything. It's just a new way for them to enjoy what we're offering.
So I want to now have a conversation also about the issues that may take place with Robert with the Class 2 mobile on-prem. Now we're going to get a little bit more technical, but this is an important conversation as well to help a supplier like us understand what are the steps that we need to think about if we're considering entering into the space on the mobile Class 2 on-prem. So issue of player liquidity, for instance, like, can you touch on that and what that is exactly?
Yeah, I would actually toss it back to you and ask, from your perspective as a supplier, what's your concern with that piece.
Well, right. Thank you for putting it back.
Yeah.
So we can,
Yeah.
I'm the moderator.
Sorry.
No, but it's important. So Play and Go doesn't have a land-based presence yet, and so we need to, if we're to consider Class 2 mobile on-prem, which we've talked about the possibility of it. It's a big investment on our part. That's a blocker for us to really understand what the investments are, what the infrastructure that we're going to need. And so because we don't have a land-based presence right now, and let me take it a step back, take my own advice that I was giving everybody here, that the importance of player liquidity is that you need multiple people to play a Class 2 game. That's the way it works. It's different than Class 3 based on random number generator. You need a minimum of 2 players to meet the required session to play the game. And so at any time of the day, let's say you want to play, you're entering a Choctaw property in Durant, and you want to hop on your phone and play a Play and Go game, hopefully one day soon, and it's maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. There's not enough people playing yet, so the game won't function. So
this is being addressed a couple of different ways, and because we're in the infancy phase of this technology, there's been a couple different approaches. So one example of an operator would be that they've chosen to only offer one supplier, right? Where they say, okay, this is the game content we're going to have. If you want to participate, this is the sole kind.
Only one supplier?
Yes.
That's not fair.
Right. I don't want to.
We want to get into this too. Now you're saying one supplier?
So then the other approach that I feel like will be more common in the future, and this is just my prediction, but would be to leverage existing bingo servers on site. Land-based operators have those in place, and so from some of the suppliers I've spoken to, that's the approach they prefer to take. The other option would be to, and this doesn't exist that I'm aware of. If it does, please call me and tell me, because I want to talk to you about it. Having some kind of universal platform that would allow multiple suppliers to plug into that server. So
that's a really good idea, and that's something that maybe we'll look into.
There you go.
We can do something with that. I want to open it up to questions. I see we have a couple minutes left.
That's a really cool idea.
I think so.
You turn it into universal. Now you're not only pulling your land-based patrons in, you're playing on your bingo server there, you're pulling your mobile as well. That's a really good idea.
Yeah. Also, with that, depending on how many people are on the network, is it just your property or is it your competitors? Are they all on the same ball call? Is there a virtual ball call where you're a virtual player where, yes, you can still have the game with one player and the other one's virtual, and sometimes you'll get a little error message for a little bit that says waiting for a player, but that could just be a virtual player potentially.
I think if you look historically at Class 2, there's been consistent innovation from the beginning, right? What started with bingo, you had pull tab machines where you had players, or operators who have to stuff the machines. Then you had, when it comes to player liquidity, you had a certain circumstance where you'd have to hit a button, right? You have to have somebody out there on the floor doing it for them. And so it's just another opportunity for us to change and grow and improve. So,
I actually want to call on my Chief Commercial Officer, Magnus Olson, to ask a question I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to ask the question to these 3 gentlemen here. What do you need to see for us to get this going, for us to get a product in place? These 3 gentlemen can answer any question you may have on this.
I was thinking, thank you. I was thinking, first of all, can tribes be a driver for regulation in states? Can they help us drive California, Florida, the states you're in, and drive towards regulation fast? That's one question. The second question I always say is, do we need to ring fence your properties to offer iGaming within your properties? And would that be a sustainable business?
Good questions.
We're already geofencing. The reservations are geofenced for Kansas. FanDuel can't just place a wager on our Indian land, so it's already geofenced. That's not a concern. It's already done. Regulation, every tribe is different. Every tribe has different compact. most of them just copy and paste the state, but it's tribe by tribe specific sometimes. So getting a tribe that's willing to help with helping with your regulations and write those regulations is going to be helpful for you. And it's a slow process. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's very, very slow.
It's fractally complex. I know that. That's why I hired you.
Very complex.
Listen, we're out of time, and we can probably go on this topic for much longer. But I want to thank the three of you for joining this panel. I think it was an interesting conversation.
Before we leave, I'll make a bold prediction, because we've heard, again, for the last 2 days, right, Maryland and New York. Since we're a betting community, I'll take the field, which means every other state or tribe, they'll get iGaming before Maryland and New York. So you heard that here on record. Gabe, Benedik, GLI. If I win, you can all send me a check for $5.
We hope it expands everywhere. But thank you all very much. Thank you.